Good morning, crafty friends. Today we're going to finish our first project in our 12 months of wholeness through creativity, and that is working on our Handmade Eclectic Artisan journal. Hopefully you've gathered all your supplies together and you've chosen all your papers and have them all laid out together. If not, go back to the first post and video and watch those, and we'll get started today with cutting and scoring our papers and getting them all ready. So we've talked about having papers of different sizes, and we're going to work with some different sizes and show you some different ways they can be done. The first one we're going to work with is our cover. There are 3 different ways that you can do your covers, and I'll show you those, or there's many more than that, but I'm going to show you 3 different ways you can do your covers this morning. And the first way is just using a heavyweight double-sided piece of cardstock. This is 12 by 12 cardstock, and we're going to need to cut it down. So we're going to start by cutting that, and we're going to cut it to 9 by 11 and a half. That's going to give us I'm going to cut the other end off. This is going to give us 1/4 of an inch leeway from our cover to our pages. That's especially needed on the sides of our papers, because as we stack all of our pages together, they're going to stick out more than the 5.5 inches that they are. So we have a 9 by 11 and a half inch piece for our cover here. Hold on to your scraps here, because you're probably going to be using them later within your journal. We're going to go ahead and do all of our cutting before we move on to our scoring, and then we'll work on that. So I've got all my pages put in order here that I want. A couple of them I've already done, so I'll show you what those are. This one's cut down, and on this one I just cut a little bit off the side, and then rather than cutting it to 8.5 by 11, I folded up part of it to make pockets on the pages. I've glued the sides down, and I've punched a little decorative design in the top. If you're going to do something like this, you'll need to do it before you attach your pages all together. The gluing on the side doesn't matter as much. But I've got that page. The next page is a tea-dyed paper that's already 8.5 by 11, so I don't need to do anything with that. The next page is a doily. It's smaller than 8.5 by 11, so I don't need to do anything with that. The next page is another 12 by 12, so I need to cut that one. And for this one, I'm going to go ahead and cut off. Again, I've got to cut off at least 3.5 inches to get it down to 8.5 inches tall. In this case, I'm going to cut just a little bit more than that. I'm going to make this one 8 inches tall. And then, rather than cutting anything off of the side, I'm going to end up folding in some on the side, and we'll do that when we score the papers. The next one is 8.5 by 11, so we don't need to do anything to it. The next one is a Bible page that's obviously quite a bit smaller, so we don't need to do anything with that. The next one is dot grid paper that I just printed off from the internet. I could leave it as is because it is the right size, but I'm going to go ahead and cut off these little dashes on the side there. So I'm going to cut a 1/2 inch off there, and I probably will not do anything with that one. Just a little bit of variety there. Here's another one that I've already cut down and folded up the pocket. This one I cut, I think it's 3 inches wide, yeah. I just cut a piece of 8.5 by 11 cardstock, so it's 8.5 inches wide, and I just cut a 3-inch strip off the bottom and punched little holes, and then we'll score that. And so we'll have a little tag page in between our pages there. Another ink dyed paper that's already 8.5 by 11. This is a receipt. Again, smaller, so we don't have to do anything with it. Music composition paper, again 8.5 by 11. I only printed one side of that one. We've got another 12 by 12 here, and I'm going to go ahead and cut the 3.5 inches off of this one. And leaving the 12 inch for now, which I will fold later. Another 8.5 by 11. Here we have a hem page, smaller. I believe this one's 8.5 by 11. It's a little bit smaller than 11 and right at 8.5, so this one will work as is. And here's another that I've already cut down and I folded over an inch, so that's another way that you can do those, cutting them down to 8.5 and just folding that extra inch over to make them 11 inches. And one more here that I'm going to do something different with, and so I'll deal with it a little bit later. I'm going to set it aside for now. I'm going to do my center page with that. So we've got all of our pages and our cover all cut down so that they fit within 8.5 by 11. So the next step is to score and fold your pages. Don't need that yet. So we are going to score with the front side of the paper sticking up, and we're going to score right in half. So we have 11.5 inches. So we're going to want to score this at 5 3/4. We're putting the bone folder right in the channel and going down. Then we're going to fold this right over in half. It's going to fold naturally where we just put it, and we're going to crease to get a nice crisp edge. That's called burnishing the edge of the paper. If you don't have a bone folder, an old credit card could maybe work for this. And we talked about before how you could use a ruler alongside the edge and maybe the blunt end of a pen or mechanical pencil without the lead, and just putting the ruler up against the center of your page, putting your ruler along there and going along that, especially with a mouse pad or something under it. Just be careful you don't rip your paper doing that. Okay, I already have this one ready. Let's see, my pages are upside down, are they? I think I was going to start with this. Okay, so I told you I folded this one up 3.5 inches and furnished it. And so that page is ready to go. This one we need to score and fold. And this is the lighter. Again, we're looking at 11 inches here, so we're going to score at 5.5. This is just copy paper that once you tea dye it, it's a little bit stiffer. So generally you're going to want to go ahead and score it. Again, burnish each page separately. Open and put them in. Your doily is going to be a lot thinner paper, so you don't necessarily need to score it. It might be easier to line it up to by just folding at a point and lining up your little edges there and scoring it, burnishing it down. Okay, our next page here with our butterflies, we left it at 12 inches here. So we're still going to want to score it at 5.5 because we don't want any pages bigger than 5.5. So we've got to score it at 5.5 or smaller. And we're going to score again to make another fold on the edge. For this one, I'm going to score it at 5 inches, so that back page is going to be a little narrower also. And then add 5.5 to that, so we've got no more. So we can't score our next one any bigger than 10.5, but I'm going to score it at 10. Again, what I'm wanting to do is make sure that every page is 5.5 by 8.5 or less. So fold over the first one. And these thinner papers, sometimes gotta get them into position to find where that score is. Crease that. Flip this one over. And crease that, and there we've got a little bit smaller page that's going to be a little smaller than the other ones. When I go to put the book together, I'll glue the top and the bottom part of that down to make this into a little tuck pocket. Okay, the next one again is thin notebook paper, so you can just fold it. It's thin enough that it's not going to crack. Next we have our Bible page. Again, that's thinner paper, so we don't need to score it. Flip it over. Next page is the copy paper again, and I've already scored this one, but just at the 5.5 line. Fold and burnish it. And the next one is another decorative sheet that I've already worked on by folding up and scoring and burnishing the bottom. And I also put a little belly band and extra pocket onto that one. The next one is our tags. This one is 8.5, so we're going to score it at 4.25. Again, we don't have to do it exactly in half. We can have our 2 pages be different sides, but for this one I will. Score it right in half. Next one again, this was ink dyed paper. Score and burnish it. You notice what a better crisp fold you get when you burnish the papers. And guess check here. I don't think I even bothered folding that one right in half. Just folded it. Decide which way I'm going to want it in my book. Music paper. Again, we'll do it right at 5.5. And when you lay them on, you can decide. Maybe you prefer it facing on the white side there, in which case you always want to score on the side that's going to be your front. So your little valley is in your front of your paper to loosen those fibers so that you can make the fold there. This one, I believe we left the 12 inches, so again, we need to bring in, I'm going to do 1.5 inches on this side, and I'm going to do the full 5.5 inches on this for my center fold. Burnish that. And burnish my pocket. Let's see which way did I put my other pocket I put on the front side of the page, so this one I think I'll put this way, with it being on the back side of the page. In here. This is thinner paper, you may not need to score it, but you can. Of course, your variety of papers can be in any order, and as you choose, if you want all plain paper, you certainly can. I prefer to do a good mix-up like this and work with them in different orders. As you've noticed, also some of my pages are embellished and have other papers on them. That's what we're saving those for doing later. Put in a hem page. This graph paper is pretty thin, so I'll just burnish it. And then last, we have a page that just has the little 1-inch fold over that I had left at the 12 inches, so it is scored at the 5.5 and the 11, marked with just a small pocket. And I believe I'll put that pocket on the left side or front side of the paper, and we're all done with our scoring, and our pages are all pretty much put together. I do want to do one more thing with the pages, and that is with this music paper I want to put in the center. A lot of times I like to do the centers of my books as envelopes, and so that's what we're going to do. I believe I told you that an envelope punch board is one of the tools that I just love and use all the time. Obviously, it's not a necessity, but it is something that I really enjoy having on hand. And so we're gonna do this as a card, and we're gonna make it a 3.5 by 6.5 inch card. So it tells me here to do that, or envelope, excuse me. So we're gonna make this 8.25 by 8.25. Again, we're going to save that. This one isn't going to matter too much what the front and what the back is, because we're going to fold it up anyhow. So, and of course you can make envelopes other ways too. You can make them without this tool, but like I said, this is one of my favorite and most convenient tools. Okay, the next thing it says is I'm going to do my punch and score line at 3 1/8 cent. So I line up my paper with the 3 1/8. I punch, and I could use that score tool, but this does come with its own score tool. So you just put it in the center and come all the way out. The next thing, we're going to put the little notch here, line it right up with that score line I just made, punch and score again, line up the notch with the score line, punch and score again right there on that channel, line up the notch, and as you can see, that edge that punched is right along that score line when I line that up. And so I can then just fold in on my score lines and create my envelope. And there we have it. On the other side, we have another rounded punch that'll round off our corner if we want to finish that off a little bit. On the inside, you don't need to do that. I generally, instead of rounding this corner, I just fold it over as evenly as I can, and then just cut that off. So that's another cool little tool that you can use to make envelopes. Actually, we will be using this tool again for next month's project, and so you'll see how versatile it is then. I'm just going to line this up in here and cut that little corner off to give me a nice fold on my envelope that is going to go in the center of my book here. Alrighty, we are almost done making the book. The only thing we have to do now is sew it all together. So you're going to want to line up your papers how you want them. Make sure that your inner ones that are 8.5 by 11 all line up, but you also need to go through and make sure that those smaller papers are where you want them lined up. So just go page by page and line them up how you'd like them to be. You want to make sure that everything comes down to the center though, because you're going to poke a hole right through the center to sew your book together, so you want to make sure that they're have at least one side in the center. And these all look pretty good to me. We're not going to glue our envelope together. We're just going to put it like this and right there in the center. Okay, so everything's lined up how we want it. Like I said, your cover is going to be bigger, so when you line this up, you're going to have about 1/4 of an inch at the top and 1/4 of an inch at the bottom. And what that's going to do is just have a little protection for your pages. As I told you, your pages are going to stick out a little further, so notice how that takes up that whole 1/2 of an inch extra that we added onto our paper there. So the next thing you're going to do is get your thread and needle ready. Again, like I said, you need a large, like an upholstery needle, a heavy duty thread. This is called a craft thread, but it's actually about the size of upholstery thread. And you want to measure about 2.5 to 3 lengths of thread and cut that off and thread your needle. I just did mine before I started videoing, so you wouldn't have to watch me fiddle with threading the needle. Okay, so then you're going to open your pages, line them up how you want them here, hold them. You can clip them if you want. For this size of book, I generally don't. I just hold them. You need a thick book type thing, a phone book, something like that that you can poke into. And as I said on the blog post, I do not bother measuring this. You could if you wanted to find the exact center and put a dot there. I just eyeball it for this. So you're just putting that fold into the folded book there. I like using a paper piercer rather than the needle, just because it's a little bit bigger and gives me a little better hole. And I need a little bit bigger size than just the point of the needle. So I'm going to push all the way through every layer through that fold and come out the other side, making sure that hole is big enough. Then I'm going to go to about 1 inch to 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches from the top. Do the same thing. And I'm going to come down to the bottom, again, 1 inch, 1.25 inches from the bottom, and poke again all the way through. Then I'm going to take my threaded needle and I'm going to come through the holes. You can either go through this one here from the inside to the out, and you see how easy that went through all the layers because I'm holding them in order, or you can go from the outside to the inside. That's usually a little trickier, and you've got to kind of line things up, but either one will work. Just because your fold is going this way, it's sometimes easier to go from the inside to the outside. So I'm going to go through. I'm going to hold on to this tail to make sure we don't pull it through to the other side. Pull that straight through. We're going to come up to the top, and we're going to go through all the layers there. Again, just work layer by layer if you need to, if it's a little tricky. Hopefully I'm still in frame there, and it came through all the layers there. And I'm going to pull that tight, but we don't want to pull down on it. We want to pull straight out so we don't get that hole made too big. Okay, now we're going to come all the way down to the bottom hole and go all the way through that. Again, pulling that nice and tight. And then we're going to go through the middle hole again. And we want to come up on the other side of our thread from where our tail is already at. So I'll try to do this so you can see it without the envelope flapping in the way. There we go, and pull it all the way through. Then you're going to go back through and make sure everything's good and tight. We don't want our pages to be too loose, so pull those good and tight, but like I said, you want to pull them straight, not against the thing. And so we've got one tail on each side of the center thread there, and we're going to tie that in a double knot or surgeon's knot, which is just wrapping the thread through twice before pulling it good and tight right there. And do that again. Pull it tight. At this point you can trim your threads either short to 1/2 inch or so, or just trim them to about the same length. I like leaving a little bit of tail on mine, so I generally do that. But that is it. Your book is basically done. You can go through and, as I said, glue the top and the bottoms of those to make little pockets that you could tuck things in. If you want to glue your envelope shut, glue it along here and here and push this up. Be sure you don't put too much glue though, or you could glue your envelope completely shut. But that way you could tuck papers or pictures or something in there, or you can just leave it open and use that as a writing spot also. Most of your other pages, you don't have anything to do unless you decide to decorate them. As you notice, the thread hole went through some of the smaller things, but some of the smaller things you only have one, and so that could wiggle a bit there, but it's still nice and secure in your book. And there you have it. Your book is ready for you to write in and decorate and use however you choose to journal, or pictures, or goals, or grocery list, or whatever you decide to do with your book. In the next video, I'm going to show you a couple different ways to make covers using the double layers that'll give you a little bit sturdier cover than this one, but this one is going to be fine as long as it's not getting too much wear. So thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next time in next month's project. I think you'll be excited to see what that is also.